Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome back to Battlefleet Gothic. This is the last of the factions that are currently out. Space Marines will be out later, but we've got the Eldar, and these guys are the faction that I actually play as. They've also got a lot of different sort of nuances and special traits that are going to be important for a newer player to go over so that they don't get sideswiped when they go into this. So let's go ahead right into that. You've got Eldar accuracy, and as you can see, they're extremely accurate out to all ranges. 40% is the highest long range, 85% is the highest short range, and 9 and 6k are kind of similar actually to the others, but it's those extremes of like just much better than Orks at any rate. They've got disciplined, they've got a much lower chance percent of insubordination at all levels, so they're less likely for their ships to run away. You are allowed to execute your generals if they try to, so they're capable of doing that sort of normal stuff, but they're less likely to in the first place. They've got fragile, which means that their ships take additional critical damage and are worse at ramming. So they deal 50% of the damage that they would normally do when they ram another ship. And like the fact that they're fragile means that they really want to avoid taking weapon damage from enemies. They will take damage from those sort of things, and they will get hit by criticals. That extra 100% just being passively on all the time is pretty bad. They've got solar sails rather than normal engines, and this means that if they lose all of their solar sails, that's the same as anyone else's engines being disabled. But until that happens, they've got the ability to move at full speed and or at fractional speed down all the way to whatever it is that you get when you're at 0 engines. I forget what it is. I think you move at half speed. So you have to destroy all the sails before that happens. And when you do destroy the sails, they also lose the hollow field efficiency by 10 points, which is pretty bad. So yeah, maximum is a 50% speed. Different ships have different numbers of sails. As you can see, this one's got 2, but it doesn't matter because it's an escort. You can't crit an escort. The next thing is hollow fields. This is what they get instead of shields. So they basically have a chance of absorbing different weapon strikes. They've got a chance of absorbing a lance in particular, they note here, at 80% is the maximum. And they've got a reduction in accuracy that enemy weapons have against them, but they have no shield, so there's no block chance or anything like that, but there is a miss chance essentially associated with this. And this is extremely good at negating lance shots. It's less good at dealing with the gun batteries, because most of them, like if we were to look at the accuracy of these, I know that Eldar ones are a little bit higher, but if you get in close, you're still going to be getting hit by 40% of these on your extremely lightly armored ships. You've got armor values of 25, 25, 25, hull integrity of 100, although, well, this isn't actually a light cruiser. So let's go look at the light cruisers. So you've got a hull integrity of 400, which is 200 less than anyone else, and your armor is only 25, which is, half of what anyone else really has realistically. You've got 0 shields, as mentioned, but your speed is 300, and it is a tremendously important statistic for these guys. They use that speed to get in and then get out as fast as possible. Their base troop value is the lowest in the game as well at 50, which means that if you're getting hit by anything, you're probably going to be taking that critical damage, so you need to be able to deal a ton of damage to the enemy using your weapons and then get back out. Hopefully without being more crippled than the enemy. You want to hope that the enemy was more crippled than you in that pass. Doesn't always happen, but you have to hope for the best as far as that goes. The Aurora is their first ship here. It's armed with a prow torpedo launcher and 2 prow pulsars. Now, prow pulsars are an interesting weapon. They essentially lock directly ahead of the ship and fire for 3 seconds, and every second they deal a huge amount of damage. I'm not even sure that the 30 is accurate. It feels like it's more sometimes, but it'll melt through a ship extremely fast. And it basically just sort of does those 3 shots, and then you turn the ship around because it's on cooldown. And the cooldown is pretty long, but that's perfectly acceptable. It's a skill shot that you sort of line up and then do over and over again whenever you get a chance. And you try and do this from outside the enemy's real range before they... you don't want to be in that 3,000 range. You want to be at that 6,000 range where people are looking at that lower accuracy value. This is definitely a mainstay ship for the light cruiser section of the Eldar, so we're going to go ahead and pick up 2 of them. Just really quick there. The other ship that they've got is the Solaris, and it is their light cruiser carrier. Now, unfortunately for them, their light cruiser carrier only has 1 launch bay rather than 2, which most people have. Now, Eldar Ordnance does have a higher % chance of avoiding or ignoring destruction, They have a 30% dodge chance. So if a fighter hits one of the bomber squadrons, that bomber squadron has a 30% chance to ignore the hit. Eldar launch bays don't allow them to launch assault boats, despite what they say here. They can only launch fighters or bombers, and one of the other elements of the fighters, or bombers rather, that the Eldar launch is that Eldar bombers have more bombers in the squadrons. For most people, I believe it's 4 fighters, 2 bombers. For Eldar, it's 3 fighters, 3 bombers. So they've got higher damage for each wave, but each wave is smaller. So it kind of evens out in that sort of sense, and since they're more likely to get them through, this can work a little bit like a more heavy bomber ship. Next up, they've got prow star cannons. This is their basic weapon. It does a little bit more than the lots of guns that the Orks have at the same sort of range, same critical chance. It's just a little bit more high damage with a higher rate of fire. They've got 6 of these, so it's very hard to knock out all the guns on a Solaris because they've got so many of them. Let's go ahead and add this here. Alright, so the next thing on the Eldar list is the escorts, and these, like the Orks, are actually fairly viable. We've got, first of all, the Hellebore frigate, and this is an extremely potent ship. It has as many guns as many larger class ships. It has a prow pulsar, and as you can see, it's a full-size pulsar. It does the full damage that an Aurora's pulsar does. So this can actually really lay the hurt down on somebody. It's also got the prow star cannon, and it's got the prow torpedo launcher. It's only got 2 torpedoes rather than 4, as other ships would have. These things can actually be used pretty effectively. They're extremely fast with a speed of 338. They've got decent hull integrity of 200 as opposed to the 100 that some lighter ones have. And you can just use these to be very, very annoying to opponents. Just hit them with those lance fire and get out there, that prow pulsar, and then get back out. And these things can pile on the damage just like the larger ships can. They are expensive though for an escort. You'd be paying like 33 or something like that for an Orkish one, or an Imperial one might be 40. These guys are 55 points, so you're paying a lot for that effect. You could take 2 of these and it would cost about as much as an Aurora. The Aurora is arguably still better than 2 of these in my opinion. It's just easier to focus that fire, even though you've got the exact same amount of hull integrity. And managing ships is actually the hardest part about the Eldar, trying to get your ships to work the way you want them to, just because they move so fast and they're so micro-intensive. So the Hellebore is a great ship, but if you don't want to have to micro these Eldar ships too much, and these are definitely micro-intensive ship, then you'll want to avoid taking too many escorts for them. But this would be a stronger one if you want to start out with that. Next is the Nightshade Destroyer. As you can see, it's got more light prow star cannons than the Hellebore. It's a lot cheaper, 13 points cheaper, but it only has prow light torpedo launchers, really. It's much, much faster even than the Hellebore at 375. That's super, super fast. It only has a hull integrity of 100, though, so these things are glass. They just launch their torpedoes and then get back out. Honestly, I don't like these. They just are so, so fragile that if anything even sort of sneezes in their general direction, they all explode. So it's very easy to lose a lot of these without them having actually done much. And since you have to micro them so intensely to use those light torpedo launchers, like you can set torpedo launchers to auto-fire, but I don't find that to be super effective. I might use it more often nowadays, but yeah, I just don't find them to be that much payoff for the amount of effort that they take. And they don't have any specialty torpedoes either. Like Eldar ones, torpedoes from the Eldar do have a chance of avoiding destruction, just like the fighters do, but it's not a great chance. Next is the Economite frigate. This is the other one that's kind of interesting. It has 15 guns, which is kind of ludicrous. It only has a damage rating of 1, though, and it has a slower rate of fire than the star cannons that were on the Solaris. So don't get too excited by that, but you can upgrade these eventually later to have the ability to penetrate hull at close range. So if you can get this behind a ship or something like that, maybe, or you know, even firing this broadside, it can deal a whole load of damage just as a steady tick against an enemy. But honestly, it's sort of a fragile ship again, and having a lot of these makes it hard to use. One of the weird things is that it does have 6 turrets. I don't know if that... Yeah, actually they do both have 6 turrets. I was wondering if the Hellebore also did. So that's actually quite a lot of anti-fighter potential as well that you can stack on these guys. Last but not least is the Hemlock Destroyer. This is another hull integrity 100 vessel, and it's another 375 speed one with a rotation of 50 degrees per second. They've got 3 light prow star cannons and the prow pulsar, so this is basically just a gigantic gun. This is actually different than the tabletop one. The one on the tabletop, the Hemlocks, all they had was the prow pulsar, which made them extremely, extremely annoying. But this again is one that you could potentially use. It's a lot cheaper than the hellebores, but again, if you're using a whole bunch of these, they become extremely difficult to micromanage. So you'll want to just sort of use these in sparing numbers, or just know that you're probably going to lose a track of them and then lose a whole bunch of them. So next up, let's go look at our skills here. So for Eldar, the Aurora is an interesting ship here. You don't have to worry about taking taunt with the Eldar because, frankly, they're the ones that you take taunt to counter. So they don't need that. They can instead focus on other elements to their fleets here. One of the things that I really like about the Eldar fleets is the Dark Star Squadron. This is an ability that lets them deploy an extra unit of fighters, even though they're not a carrier ship. So this can help them avoid getting shot down by bombs and stuff like that, bombers and assault boats, which sort of fixes one of the sort of critical weaknesses of Eldar fleets, is that if you're trying to skirmish around, you're trying to stay at a distance against an enemy, those enemies could really just nail you with fighters over and over again while you're at a distance and while they're hiding in a cloud or something like that. Dark Star Squadrons really fix that. The next thing that you would want to consider is the Wandering Spirit Stone, which is their recon beacon. It's exactly the same as a recon beacon. They've got the Wraithstone Probe. They've basically just got refluff names for a lot of these abilities. But in their particular case, Wandering Spirit Stone is useful so that you can definitely get a good glimpse of an opponent at that 6,000 range rather than that 5,000. The other option is that you wait until you get your upgrades up and you get the Vigilant Spirit Stones and increase your vision range to 7,500, which it outranges your Prow Pulsars, which means that you could get in there, see them before you can fire that, and potentially cause that damage and then get away before your opponent could even see you. It's not likely. Your turn radius is good. It's not that good, but yeah, you could definitely lay some smackdown on them doing that sort of method. So it really comes down to which of those you prefer. For the time being, though, we'll go ahead and get a recon beacon on our first one. And our second one is going to get a Dark Star Squadron. This means that no matter what composition I'm going in with, I will have some fighter cover, basically, which is important. It's a good thing to have. Lastly, we've got the Solaris. It is a carrier-type ship. One of the unique things that I haven't talked about really here, though, is the unique... Let's talk about the unique Eldar skills. They've got Wraithbone Reinforcement. This has a duration of 20 seconds, and it turns your front armor basically to 100. Now, this is really not useful. It's only got 20 seconds every 120 seconds, and, like, it doesn't count for ramming actions, so if you're accidentally running into an enemy, you can't actually activate it at the last second. And a lot of the stuff that does not ignore armor is stuff that you shouldn't be getting hit by too much in the first place. So I don't think this is a particularly great ability. If it lasted longer, maybe that would be better, but as it is, it just you don't often take too many hits to the front of your ship before you blow your weapons and then run around. So it's not a great ability there. Next is Hollow Field Overcharge. Basically, this sets your hollow fields to the maximum value possible. I don't remember if I mentioned this, but hollow fields only work when you're moving, and the faster you're moving, the better they work. So it's kind of an interesting thing. The next thing, they've got Augur Disruptors. Now, enemy ships in a medium range around their detection range reduced to 1,000 for a short time. This is kind of an interesting ability that you could use on the Eldar, since they are able to use a lot of high-speed maneuvers. One of the things you can do if you want to is pop Augur Disruptor, and then pop Stealth when you see fighters incoming, and the fighters will turn around, and that's a good way to avoid those. If you see a ship that's going to really pound into you, this is a good way to stop them from doing that. And you could even do that combination if opponents have you taunted and you've got your distance set to 3,000. You'll be 3,000 away from them, and they'll have no ability to actually attack you while you're sort of circling slowly around their ship. In fact, they won't even be able to detect you. So Augur Disruptors can be really strong on the Eldar, but I don't think it works too well on their light cruisers. Lastly is the unique Tech Vols maneuver. It's on cooldown for only 30 seconds, and it lets you do a 180-degree turn instantly. So you set that to autocast. Every time you try and turn around directly behind you, you automatically spin around in place. If you look at the stats here, though, the turn radius on these guys is ridiculously fast. They do not need Vols maneuver typically to get around in a circle. So we're not going to worry about that in particular on our Solaris here. Now, what I am going to pick up is a stasis bomb. I think that it works quite well in just a lot of situations on a lot of different types of ships. So we're going to pick that up, and we're going to go ahead and hit search here. So the way that the Eldar work is they do hit and run tactics similar to Chaos and closer than Chaos does. And they're rewarded with much, much higher damage, but at much higher risk when they do it. So it's more dangerous for Eldar to do those sorts of trades, but it's also more rewarding. Here we can see another Chaos fleet. It'll definitely have some carriers there. Let's go ahead and take our recon beacon and our fighter escort. And we'll go ahead and join in with this particular composition. I could have also done this one with a bunch of hellebores, but again, they're hard to manage. It's hard to figure out what you're doing when you're going in with all those different ships that you have to micro. So we're going to do the safer option. The nice thing about Chaos is that they typically don't have the most macro batteries that are effective. The bad thing is that their macro batteries that they do have extremely long range. So you do have to watch out for that element to them. Oh shit, what the crap? All right, perfect. Right, so let's pretend this match never happened. Our opponent, I think, was hoping for Orks. So, yeah, here's the thing about this game. There is kind of a counter system. If your opponent is Orks and you're playing as Chaos, you'll instantly and automatically win. There's no way for that Orc player to really win unless you botch it really badly or they're much higher level, as you saw. Once you get to higher levels, like Chaos has tricks to get out of those sort of situations as well, so it's not like Orks are the only ones that get better. But the thing about Chaos is that they don't do too well against Eldar, because early on they don't have the best macro batteries. Alright, so we're going to pretend that match never happened, and we're not going to level up our ships, so let's go ahead and get into another one of these. Could bring our Solaris for free levels. People are going to keep dropping against us, but yeah, the Eldar have a sort of reputation, though, as being a little bit too powerful, I think, just from the beta. Not sure how true that is right now, though. Alright, is this the same guy? I might have to restart the series. But yeah, I have beaten a lot of Eldar players as Chaos, both in the beta when they were really more powerful than they are now, as well as now, because they're not actually impossible to beat with any of the currently existing factions. It just depends on how the Eldar player is playing more than anything, unfortunately. There are certain things that you, as the Chaos, Orc, or Imperial player, can do to sort of try and beat Eldar, but realistically, it's mostly down to if the Eldar player makes too many mistakes, he'll probably get destroyed. Or, of course, if you have a lot of abilities that wreck Eldar, then you might be able to win based off that. But I've had matches where like I've been chain tractored like 4 or 5 times with one of my more advanced ships, and it didn't matter. Like I was still able to just blow up the ship that was doing that, and then every time the chain tractor got shorter and shorter and shorter until they couldn't do it anymore. Because every time we'd do those exchanges, one of their ships would explode, whereas one of mine would just zoom away with a little bit of health left. You really do need to ram ships with when you're fighting against Eldar. You need to get them into that situation where they're locked down or whatever. Just ram them. Alright, so hopefully this guy's not going to run away this time. Whatever. Let's go ahead and drop these guys down. We're going to have our Dark Star Squadron deployed every 180 seconds just automatically. We'll even try and turn on automatic deployment for those torpedoes. But that's all we really need to do for these. We won't want to get close enough to use boarding actions, so we can just have this automatically set to casting Lightning Strike. But we'll keep that off for now. We'll see what they've got. Because we don't want to accidentally Lightning Strike a whole boatload of really light escorts. That would be really awkward. I have done that before because I don't like having to manually Lightning Strike. Because I'm very, very slow on the micro, especially since I don't actually know what, like, hotkeys are set for any of this stuff, so if I knew those a little bit better, I'd probably do a little bit more, but I'm not a hotkey sort of player anyway. Alright, so he had readied up, and now he's not ready, so that's fun. Alright, so we got our fighters deployed, which is, you know, important. Let's see what we've got here. Alright, we got 2 Chaos ships, and it looks like they actually own 4, so there's going to be some light ships in tow here. Alright, so let's go ahead and attack to the side that has the gas cloud, so that we can potentially juke past them and get into that gas cloud. I don't actually know what he could be running here, but I suspect that it's going to be 3 escorts and then their capital. But let's keep an eye on our own ships just so that we don't run into any landmines or anything like that, or any of these space debris chunks. I don't even know if you can run into this particular one. Like, you can run into some terrain, and I'm not 100% sure which stuff you can or cannot run into safely, but pretty sure that was one that you destroyed yourself on. Alright, so it looks like this is going to be their cruiser. There's a landmine over there. Let's get this wiggled over this way so I fire that other torpedo spread. Oops, I forgot to disable this, so we're going to take this off. And we'll just fire all our laser beams, instantly destroy a ship, and then get out. Alright, so now that we've instantly destroyed a ship, we're going to go zoom away so we don't take too much macro battery fire. You can see my opponent is now making good his own escape. So that's what the Eldar have instead of all head full. It's this very short duration sprint that basically lets them get out of harm's way very, very effectively. Oh, we're taking some macro battery fire. And there's an auger probe heading our way, but that's not going to matter a whole lot because we're going to be heading into this gas cloud here. And once we're in this gas cloud, it doesn't matter if we get auger probed. We get auger probed. And our opponent took a Hellbringer Mark II against Eldar. That's a terrible idea.
Yes, Commander.
Alright, so let's actually... We could even...
Move at full speed.
Alright. So, one of the things about Eldar maneuvers is that they don't actually cause your ships to be revealed. Which is, you know, quite a nice bonus. Alright, so let's go ahead and just burn down this ship here real quick.
Until the end.
Alright, back into the gas cloud. And this is that hit and run stuff that those Eldar do. And you can see we've taken a little bit of chip damage from their consecutive hits. Oh, we got those torpedoes on that guy. Really nice.
The Eldar stand ready.
Alright, so I think...
Yes, Commander.
Hello, ship?
Acknowledge.
Oh dear. Okay, well that was interesting. Alright, let's go ahead and hit repair on this guy. And let's go ahead and get this escort here. Looks like my Dark Stars came off cooldown again. And we're sort of tickling this with that beam there. And it looks like we didn't actually even kill it. It managed to survive. I have no other weapons, so that basically is it. Alright, let's see what happens here. So, yeah, we just want to keep the enemy at reduced accuracy as possible. At these sort of distances, they're probably not going to cause very many hits, so we don't have to worry too much about our ships. But, we're almost off cooldown for this Aurora, so we're going to go ahead and hit that. I'm going to try and disable the shields.
Yes, Commander.
I feel like that's usually a good call. Just tickle that there.
The Eldar stand ready.
There we go. And just try and keep in motion the entire time when you're playing as the Eldar. Let's see if we can't line up a torpedo shot here.
The Eldar stand ready.
Hello? Alright, we'll fire them manually then. I don't think I'm gonna hit, but... oh no, I got one of them.
Acknowledge.
Oh, weapon destroyed. That's really bad, potentially. Oh, no, it's the torpedo launcher. Who cares? I just fired that anyway. Pew, 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 pew.
Yes, Commander.
Alright, so we got one more torpedo spread here. I think that'll be it. Oh, wow, he survived that.
At your service.
Nope, he didn't. Okay. So that's how you play as the Eldar. It's very much all about keeping in that motion. My opponent did have a really bad fleet composition to fight an Eldar fleet, because lances do essentially nothing against them. That 90 or 80% block chance against lances just means you're never going to get clean shots off and hits against them with those. You're much better off with lots and lots of macro batteries. So, alright, that leads us directly into our next video, but I'll leave that here for now. I hope you found this episode enjoyable. And, oh wait, no, upgrades, ship upgrades, right. It's just, usually I don't do that after the second fight, I do that after the first fight, which was not a fight, was not a real fight. Alright, so let's go ahead and show you guys the upgrades for these guys. They've got some interesting options here. They've got one of the only just outright speed boosts in the game. the Dragon Sail increases your speed by 50 points, which is ludicrously fast. It used to be 75, it got nerfed down to 50. That's still too high. They've got something that increases their rotation rate by 5%, which is entirely redundant for the Eldar. They've got something that makes it so that they're harder to hit when they're in a gas cloud or in an asteroid field. So microing around in those can become extremely good for you, because when you're reducing the enemy's macro battery accuracy by 70%, that's basically as good as that 80% dodge chance that you used to have anyway. There's the Phoenix Sail, which means that your engine speed doesn't get divided as badly. I think that's worded very poorly, though. Polarized Field, everyone has that sort of effect where they can go through asteroids. Eldar are no exception. Reinforced Hollow Field used to have a much better effect. It used to increase it by an extra 10% efficiency. This unfortunately says that it can no longer be reduced under 20%. That's when it starts getting hits to, like, when you're no longer moving, essentially. It stays at 20%. You should always be moving, so you should not have to get that. They've got Deflecting Hollow Field, which reduces the critical damage penalty caused by the Fragile attribute at 150% instead of 100%. At 50%. So you're 150% likely to get a critical as opposed to a normal ship, which is 100%, or a normal Eldar ship, which is 200% likely to get a critical. Personally, I don't particularly like this. What I like to get instead is the Belt Armor. This lets you ignore a critical hit, essentially. So this is extremely useful for the Eldar, because this also works if they do boarding actions. And I believe that Belt Armor works to the first critical hit to each of those systems. So essentially, if you're really unlucky, or really lucky, depending on how you look at it, you can ignore 3 criticals with Belt Armor, which is usually going to be better than something like Deflecting Hollow Field. So that's the sort of thing that you want to look at for the Eldar. Unfortunately, they have nothing that just outright increases their shields, obviously, because they don't have any. But it used to be that you would always take the Reinforced Hollow Field. Now that's no longer the case with the new bonus there. Hull Reinforcement is their only real outright durability bonus there. They could take something like Aspect of the Fire Dragon. Fires are quite deadly to Eldar ships, but even then, typically if you get lit on fire too many times, you're just in trouble. Because of the way things are currently, usually you just want to focus entirely on offense as the Eldar for your early ships in particular. Something like the Resonating Crystal focusing is actually really, really strong on these Auroras. It means that they'll burn through that shield so much faster that the enemy ships won't have a time to bring in their shields back up at all before your second one moves in and starts dealing damage. And it also means that you're dealing damage directly to the hull a lot earlier. The other thing that's quite strong, especially if you've taken the Fleet Beacon, the Wandering Spirit Stone, is to get the 3,000 range pulsars. So we're going to actually pick that up with ours. And now that we've got those 9,000 range ones, as soon as we see an enemy using our Wandering Spirit Stone, our recon beacon, we can hit them with the pulsars from that such a long distance that they can't even retaliate because they won't be able to see our ships. And by then, we've got a good beefy 4,000 unit distance before we can turn around, get away from them, and they're not even likely to have line of sight to our ships at that point in time. That gives us tons and tons of time to get around outside of their line of sight while still being able to fire at them. So we're going to go ahead and get that for both of our ships here. Now, for crew, for Eldar, you almost always want to get the Blade Sworn first, and the reason is that Eldar, with their troop value at being 50, is so weak that they need those crew values to improve before they get up there, because criticals are the bane of the Eldar. They're very, very weak to critical hits, and keeping your systems up and running, crew value helps tremendously with that. So we're going to go ahead and pick up Blade Sworn here. Master Gunner, once you finish that, is quite strong, because you'll often want to have those lances, those pulsars, if they have a high critical chance. It's not a great critical chance, but it's good enough. Like, you've got 8 critical chance. It goes up to, I believe, 13 when you fully upgraded your gun crews. That's a huge amount of potential criticals that you're just going to have by pointing your lasers at the enemy and painting with that. The other thing that the Eldar want, since they don't often need to use those Spirit Stones there, though you don't need to use your skills on cooldown as often as other people, because you can time people out very, very easily. You can run away very, very effectively as Eldar. What I like to get after the Blade Sworn or Master Gunner, depending on how I'm feeling, I get the Bone Singers, because this gives you that extra healing stat, which for Eldar, since you've got such a small hull integrity pool, a little bit of healing means that you're getting a lot more hull points back by percentage. So it extends the longevity of those Eldar ships by huge, huge margin. So I think that it's a little bit underrated for most factions, but for the Eldar, it's an important skill or ability to have. So I would definitely go Bladesword first. After that, I would consider something like Master Gunner or Bonesinger. It's a little bit 50-50 for those, depending on what you're finding the meta to look like. For favors, there's only really two that I could honestly recommend, but we can look at these other ones first. There's Alitok. They've got the Pathfinder Webway Assault, and this is an unlimited ranged lightning strike, essentially. It always automatically disables something. Unfortunately, I don't think you can guarantee that it will target the system that you want. If it could, it would be a really good ability. It does have a 300-second cooldown, though, which is very, very long, and it starts on cooldown, meaning that you're going to have to wait a long time before you can do this. And if you wait 300 seconds and all you get is you lit a fire, that's really a wasted ability there. So it's kind of very situational. It can go either way, and it's very, very RNG related. The other ability is Chameleon Alloy. As long as you aren't moving, you're considered hidden, not even appearing as a blip. So, yeah, I don't like this ability just because it encourages camping, where you've got your sort of fleet set up and you just sort of sit there, or you run silently and move to somewhere and then you sort of sit there. In assassination missions, I can imagine an Alitok fleet being a nightmare because you would never be able to find that ship and hunt it down. It would just be impossible. So I think that this is sort of one of those abilities that encourages bad play, so I wouldn't ever recommend taking it. You could also use that, though, to wait for the Pathfinder Webway Assault. Now, that being said, I mean, there are definitely times where, sure, just take the damn ability. It's strong in certain situations, in certain contexts, in Cruiser Clash in particular, where you can force a 300-second cooldown to happen a couple times, and if you've got a whole bunch of Alitok cruisers, you could really lay the smackdown automatically with no counterplay on some sort of really big ship, like a battle cruiser or something like that. If you just did that, this could be really valuable. So it's for assassinating an enemy ship, essentially, and then forcing him to wait until you've moved. You relocate your fleet, and you sort of sit there and you use run silently. And yeah, it's just not a really fun way to play the game for your opponent, and I can't really recommend it for that purpose. The next one is Beltan. This is one that I actually think is really strong and both strong and a good thing to take. The Avatar of Cain replaces the basic Lightning Strike, and it basically just gives you an additional assault action on Lightning Strike. So you Lightning Strike instead of just one, you get two. Fairly good ability for Eldar because you don't want to be in boarding range. And it's just all around your typical Lightning Strike sort of spell ability there. Next up, they've got plus 20 troop value, and this brings them up to as high a troop value as the Orks, which means that they're as resilient to boarding parties and stuff like that. They can get up to 79 with this, and this, I think, makes Beltan the best of these, just for without having to do anything too crazy, because that troop value of 79 means that your fleet is going to be very resilient to things like boarding parties and those criticals that are caused by that. And protecting against that is really something that the Eldar need to focus on, because those things are the bane of Eldar fleets. They really are. You need to protect against your crew value as much as you can, and Beltan lets you do it. So definitely my first choice. Next up is Siamhan. These are also a kind of skirmishy one. Basically, this is the exact same as the skill in the upgrades tree. If we looked at, I forget what's called, or no, not an upgrade, a skill. It is the exact same as the Augur Disruptors, essentially, except it has a larger range. So if we were to look at this, it has a range of 10,000. Enemy ship scanners within 10,000 units are crippled and have their detection range reduced to 1,000 for 20 seconds. It's only got a duration of 20 seconds there. Has got a long cooldown, and it's... I think it's targeted. Like, if I recall correctly, it is targeted. So... no, actually, it is all ships within 10,000. So it is basically just exactly the same, except with slightly longer range. Honestly, I would just take the skill on one of your ships. You only really need one ship to have it. Although, I guess you could have your ships rotate through the skill if you really wanted to. Like, if you had a whole bunch of ships that had... if you had a bunch of ships that had both Augur Disruptors and the other one, you could just wait 20 seconds or whatever. What's the duration of this thing? Duration is 25 seconds. So if you could like wait, you could use this first one with Siamhan, and wait 20 seconds, then activate another one, and then activate another one, and the enemy is just going to be like punching in the dark, I guess, for forever. So there's some interesting things you could do for there. I've never actually done that because it seems like a bit of a micro-intensive, difficult thing to do, because you can't have that on autocast, really. If you have it on autocast, what's going to happen is your ships are going to all use it at once, and that's not going to be any good for you. The other ability they have is Ambusher. So as long as the ship is hidden, and that synergizes actually really well with their Phantom Disruption, it deals extra damage. So this is a great way for you to deal extra damage and to sort of strike from the shadows. It doesn't really cover any of their weaknesses, so if you do get caught, you are going to be in as much trouble as you would be. Things like auger disruptor, or sorry, not auger disruptors, things like the recon beacons and stuff like that, or if you've already been spotted, are really going to stop you from being able to effectively use this ambusher trait. And most fleets should have something in there that can sort of counterplay against that kind of element there. The last one is Altway, and it's the other one that people would definitely tell you is worth taking. If I can get this to run again. Oh god, the horror, the horror. As my computer crashes. So Altway has two abilities. They've got, first of all, Maelstrom, which is a gigantic sort of area effect storm that you can put down. It deals a slow tick of damage, and is a pretty decent way to flush people out of a cloud or something like that if they're camping in there and you don't want to go in there to get them out if you don't have enough vision to get them out of there. So you could do that for that purpose, most certainly. And the other effect is that plus 30 troop value against teleport attacks. So any sort of teleport attack in the game. This means that they're extremely unlikely to succumb to those sort of things, but they're still just as vulnerable to boarding actions and assault boats. This is why I prefer Baal-Tan, is because their plus 20 is more universal and protects against those other effects there. But definitely, it is much more likely for you to get hit by those effects, especially if you're playing Altway and have lots of carriers and lots of fighters. Then you don't have to worry as much about those boarding parties from those assault boats. You still have to worry about boarding actions, but you should be fast enough to keep away from your opponent if he's trying to do that. So Altway can definitely be very viable for that effect. So yeah, all of these are actually quite strong. It's just that two of them promote a gameplay style that I think is quite bad for the game. But either way, that's everything I've got to say about Eldar. You should have a pretty decent and easy time winning games with them if you've got something that sort of looks like this by the end of your sort of level 1 run. We'll get to the cruiser in our next video, but I hope you found this video informative, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.